Hello and welcome to Breast Friends Cancer Support Network. My name is Michelle Beck. I'm a two-time 9-year survivor of breast cancer. I'm the patient programs assistant at Breast Friends of Oregon. And when I have time, you can find me on my blog or on social media at I Never Liked Pink. So today, I'm super excited to have a repeat guest here today. Her name is Cathy Leman, and we just keep having her back because she has so much good information. So Cathy she helps hormone positive breast cancer survivors eat with peace, not panic. I love that because what we put into our bodies is really challenging after a cancer diagnosis. So Cathy knows all this because she's a registered dietitian, certified personal trainer, and a nutrition therapist. And all of these are so important and they really go together to lead an healthy life, which is very important. Moving around my words there. But it's even more so after a cancer diagnosis. Cathy is the creator of the Peaceful Plate program, which I do want to hear more about. And she writes at the Damn Mad About Cancer blog, which you can find at thedamnmadaboutcancer.com/blog. So let's get started today, Cathy. I know we're going to talk about alcohol and breast cancer today, the facts, the fiction, because summer is coming. And that really is a time when alcohol intake tends to go up because we're outside, we're on vacation, we're at parties, we're hanging out. So that we thought this would be a really good time to discuss what really is important to know about alcohol consumption after you've had a breast cancer diagnosis. So Cathy, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's fun to be back with you. As always, we're going to have a great conversation, I'm sure. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. Now, I gave a brief synopsis of what you do, but can you expand on that a little bit more for our listeners?
I'd love to. Thank you. So I am a dietitian, a personal trainer, and a nutrition therapist. But I think the most important thing that I forgot to include in my intro for you is that I'm also a survivor of hormone-driven breast cancer. And my diagnosis was in 2014. I finished treatment in February of 2015. So I'm about 7.5 years out from that. And at the time of my diagnosis, I was working in my private practice and my private personal training studio. And after that experience, I felt like I really wanted to give back to the breast cancer community. I felt pulled and called to do that, but I wasn't sure what that would look like. And over the last few years, I've really sort of started to figure it out. I started blogging at my Damn Mad About Breast Cancer blog, as you mentioned. And over the last few years, I've really noticed where there's a need in the breast cancer community. So that's where I've focused my work.
Well, definitely you've shifted your focus into really helping the patients who have gone through this because the hormone-driven breast cancer is the most common kind of breast cancer that women go through. And even though it is the most common, we need direction, we need guidance. And for so many of us, myself included, we're kind of lost about what we should be doing afterwards. And listeners, you can also find Cathy on Instagram at Hormone Breast Cancer Dietitian. And she always gives little videos with tips and tools. And I love them because they really reinforce that even if you think you're like, oh gosh, I made a wrong choice in what I'm eating, it's okay. Tomorrow is another day. There's moderation and you do the best you can. And I think that what comes with the eating with peace, not panic. So, because if you panic, your body gets stressed and then it just causes more problems. So,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. There's so much conflicting information out there. And to your point, I do work primarily with hormone-driven breast cancer survivors after they've finished treatment. But I also like to say that I don't exclude any breast cancer survivor in my work. My work is beneficial and helpful for anyone who's been through breast cancer because I write about nutrition and self-care and fitness, from a broad perspective. But the work that I do in my Peaceful Plate program is really targeted to those of us who've survived hormone-driven because I find, as you said, that's the most common kind of breast cancer. And because of some of the nuances of our subtype of breast cancer, there is a lot of panic and stress and anxiety around food. And how you finish treatment and you say, okay, now I'm done. Now I want that never to happen again. Hopefully. So what are the things I can do to potentially minimize that from happening? And diet is really the first low-hanging fruit, no pun intended, that women tend to easily gravitate toward. They say, you know what? I can address my diet and my nutrition. But that's where the panic sets in, because they start doing a little research on their own, or they ask their oncologist and may not get an answer that they're comfortable with, or the oncologist may not really have something,
Well, because that's not their forte.
Right. They're not trained in nutrition. They're trained to manage your medication and your treatment, but nutrition is not where they have their training. So, so women then end up being more confused because they said, I get all this conflicting advice. And then what I find is women start to go down the path of gathering advice from well-intentioned, but clearly erroneous sources. And I always remind people, I'm a dietitian, so my degree is in nutrition, and we learn the evidence, science-backed information about nutrition. It's a science, it's not an opinion. And so my work is really to help women get that information they need so they can eat with peace and not panic, and address their diet in a way that they feel good about.
Well, that's so important. And that's what we're going to talk about today too, is alcohol, because that is something
Yes.
that also goes into our bodies after breast cancer that we do have control over. But there's so much conflicting and confusing evidence out there. Like, do I need to quit cold turkey? Did drinking alcohol cause my cancer? If I drink now afterwards, will it make my cancer come back? Like, what the hell? Like, I don't know. And, for me, like, I used to drink a lot more. But honestly, and it's obviously I'm 50 now, I don't need to go out and, tie one on, but I like a nice glass of wine or a cocktail every now and then. And it just, sometimes I do feel guilty. Like, am I harming my body just by having something that I really enjoy? So where do we go to find the right information, other than you, of course, but let's talk about all of that.
Yeah, no, I always say, I don't do the research. I'm the vehicle through which it comes through, so that I share the information and the guidelines. And then I help women take that information, guidelines, and apply it to their life in a way that helps them live their life the way they want to do that. So to your point, alcohol is one of the most panic inducing compounds we can put in our body during and after breast cancer. And it's very confusing. And so this is where I find women get information that is not accurate, and they start to glom onto that information and get panicked. So what I use, for science-based recommendations, I use a number of resources. So I go to the World Cancer Research Fund. I use the American Cancer Society. I use the National Cancer Institute, and I use the American Institute for Cancer Research. And the reason why I speak to those organizations is because it's interesting to look at individual studies, but that is not conclusive information. It's interesting, but it doesn't give us the whole story. And I find that when women who are not, someone who doesn't have a background in nutrition, or someone who's been diagnosed and is like, well, what do I do about alcohol? Let me start researching now that Google is so readily available to tell us everything.
Yeah, Google is a good thing and a bad thing.
1000%. Yeah. So they start looking at individual studies. And you can find a study to support any thought that you have about anything. So I like to go first off to the organizations that collect and review the information to help them create guidelines for those of us who have been diagnosed or interested in prevention as well. That's where I start.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And let's clarify too, before we really get into the science, because we spoke before about this, and it really is, there is science based on all the information we're going to discuss today. So when we're discussing alcohol, what does that include?
Yeah, so it's all alcohol: beer, wine, spirits, liquor. All alcohol contains something called ethanol.
Which, when I think of that, I'm like, that sounds like something I should be putting in my gas tank.
That's your car, right? That's what you think. Yeah, I know. Same thing. But ethanol is the cancer-causing compound. And unless you are drinking a non-alcoholic beverage, and even non-alcohol beverages sometimes will have a tiny percentage, a little bit of alcohol in them. Is it enough to have an impact negatively? Probably not. But unless you're drinking something that's completely void of alcohol, you're ingesting ethanol. And so the extent to which alcohol is the cause of various cancers depends on the amount and frequency, obviously, because then that impacts how much you're having and how often. But ethanol is the cancer-causing compound in any type of alcohol.
Now, is the ethanol what gives us the relaxation or the buzz, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Well, and we can talk more about the impact of the ethanol, but I don't know that. That's a really great question. I've never thought about that. I just think of it collectively. It's maybe the fermentation and
Sure.
because I don't know if ethanol would be the compound, as I think about it, that would cause that loopy, comfortable, hangover, drunk.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's the ethanol, but it kind of stands to reason too. If you drink something that does not have alcohol in it, non-alcoholic beverage like a non-alcoholic beer, there's the ethanol level is lower. So yeah, I don't know. That's a great question.
Interesting. I'll have to do some research on my own on those websites that you mentioned.
Let me know. I don't know if they answer that. You might have to do a little more digging.
I can do that. Now, one of the things that I've heard that is conflicting, that is a glass of red wine is good for your heart health. But if it's good for your heart health, but potentially has ethanol, well, it does have ethanol in it to cause cancer. How do we work around that dichotomy and how that fits into our lives as breast cancer survivors?
Yeah, great question. I hear that so often. Well, wine is supposed to be good for you. And so that recommendation came about a number of years ago, a couple decades ago. If you might remember the term French paradox, where some of the research was looking at people who live in France and other regions of the Mediterranean, how they enjoy a really high quality level of health. And they happen to, by the way, drink red wine. So they were looking at, is the wine an impact? And so what we've learned since then is that this overall good health is likely due to less stress, a healthy lifestyle overall, higher quality food, more produce and vegetables, fruits and vegetables, a healthier diet overall. And by the way, there may be some wine consumption. So it collectively could be associated with that. The other thing that most people see is the recommendation is connected to heart health, as you mentioned. And with the benefit of red wine, it appears to be associated with an antioxidant polyphenol called resveratrol. I'm sure you're familiar with the term resveratrol. But what the research looks at to answer is, does that offer health benefits, resveratrol? It may, but the studies are mixed. And so it's never recommended to start drinking alcohol as a way to improve heart health. I would say go for a walk first, to get your increased heart, your strength of your heart muscle. But resveratrol is found in all sorts of foods.
I was going to ask that. Can you get it anywhere else?
Yes. Cranberries, blueberries, even cocoa has resveratrol. So using wine as the excuse to get your resveratrol, no. There are other ways to get it, but it is a beneficial compound, but the vehicle doesn't have to be wine.
Sure. And I think taking a step back, and when you were talking about the studies and how in a lot of parts of Europe and France, and especially the Greek areas too, it's the diet that is making so much of a difference. The Mediterranean diet is one of the most that people talk about being healthy because it has, a lot of shellfish and not a lot of grains, and it's just good for you overall. So, it may not be the wine, but it's the combination of those things together.
I would say it's diet and lifestyle. It's the whole collective diet is part of your lifestyle, right? And so the diet, it's actually in the Mediterranean countries and France, grains are a very significant part of their diet. It's really more about high quality, less processed.
How it's processed. Yes. Got it.
It's they'll go to, dinner will be fish or, seafood or a small amount of meat and tons of vegetables and rice and beans and, those sort of like real foods rather than a drive-through with a number 2 supersized. If you look just at the diet, there's a big distinction right there, but also lifestyle. Do they walk more because they're less dependent on car travel? Is there more social support because maybe, there's a town square where they get it. So it's the whole lifestyle is what contributes for sure.
Yeah, completely makes sense. So, and if you can't start, and we're not saying that you have to change your lifestyle right away, right now, change all of these things, but if you can start working on one thing at a time, take it in small bits, whether it's working on your diet first or working on your moving your body or cutting down the alcohol. You can work on all of these things in small chunks to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So if someone asks you, if I drink alcohol, does that cause cancer? How would you answer that?
Well, I would answer it based on what the research shows. And what the research tells us is that alcohol raises the risk of a number of types of cancer. And that includes head and neck cancer, stomach, liver, esophageal cancer. But interestingly, it seems to decrease the risk of kidney cancer. So we can't say across the board that alcohol at this time, remember, research is always ongoing, but at this time, we don't know that it increases risk for all, but there's still a lot we don't know in this area, and studies are ongoing. And so there are several ways that it increases risk, and those mechanisms aren't fully understood, but we do know that alcohol is known to damage DNA. And when DNA damage at the cellular level, that can contribute to the cancer risk.
That totally makes sense. So, just we'll dig more into the science of it soon, but just the knowing in your head that, okay, studies show that this can cause cancer in various parts of our bodies, not just the liver, which is intuitive because the liver is where it
metabolize it, helps
thank you, that right word. And that's, we think of alcohol causing liver disease and things like that, but yes, also cancer. But like the fact that, like you mentioned, the esophageal and all the other parts, it really just shows, either best to not do it at all or to really do it in moderation.
Well, yeah. And one other point I wanted to make quickly before we go to break is, regarding breast cancer risk, the World Cancer Research Fund finds a strong link between alcohol consumption and pre and postmenopausal breast cancer initial diagnosis. Mm-hmm. But regarding recurrence, new survivorship guidelines from the American Cancer Society say that the evidence is inconsistent regarding recurrence, but there may be possible associations by estrogen receptor status and menopausal status, and that warrants further investigation. So we also have to look at recommendations. Are they for preventing or reducing risk of an initial breast cancer diagnosis, or those of us who are in survivorship, we tend to look at recurrence. But I think women forget about a new primary, secondary cancer. So we've got to look at the big picture.
Oh, definitely. And the risk of recurrence is something that is a fear on everyone's mind every day. It might not be at the forefront, but for me, I'm almost 6 years out from my last round of treatment, and it's still in my head. So, trying to do things to stop that possible risk is at the forefront of my mind, along with balancing the quality of life. And Not that I have to have a drink to have a good quality of life, but sometimes it's nice. So it's good to have all the information and to be fully informed so we can make the right decisions for ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and recurrence risk or concern is the one panic driver with alcohol. I mean, that I've done an informal poll and people are telling me my concern about alcohol is, will it cause a recurrence? And so I like to share the message that, let's talk about that, but let's also talk about your overall health and survivorship and how it can impact risk for other cancers. We're more susceptible now that we're survivors to other cancers. We're more susceptible.
Thank you for that. It's such good information. We're going to dig into the science a little bit more when we get back. So listeners, we are going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. If you would like to see what Breast Friends can do for you, please go to our website under patient programs and check out what we have going on. If you would like to make a donation to help Breast Friends continue on its mission to ensure that women do not go through cancer alone, you can donate on our website or by texting BF Radio to 41444. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Michelle Beck. My guest is Cathy Leman, registered dietitian, nutrition, health coach, so many more. I would also throw in their lifestyle advocate, and a hormone positive breast cancer survivor. So we've been talking about alcohol and cancer and the should we not, all the things. But I want to know a little bit more of the science stuff because, I've heard the general, but you had mentioned something earlier, or when we were talking previously about tumor markers. Now, how does alcohol affect or come into play with your tumor markers?
Yes. So I found that question really interesting. I actually saw it floating around online in a couple of sites that I belong to, private sites for breast cancer survivors. I'd never thought about that. And so that's, where I learned what women are concerned about is by just kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of what women want to know. And so I did a little research, and what I found is that there's indication that alcohol has been associated with enhanced angiogenesis. Now, for your listeners who don't know what that is or have not heard that term.
Including myself.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. So angiogenesis is the development of new blood vessels. And cancer tumors can grow their own blood vessels so that they create their own blood vessel supply. And that, which sounds terrifying, and it is kind of terrifying, but what that does is then that can promote tumor growth. And because they're getting more blood supply, they're saying, oh, this is kind of like a lifeline. I'm building myself a lifeline to be able to grow and thrive. So there's some research I saw that shows that alcohol enhances that angiogenesis. It means it's putting fuel on the fire, allowing your body, the cells to create these new blood cells, or blood vessels, excuse me, not blood cells. But I've not seen research indicating that that relates directly as a cause of an increase in tumor markers. Now, there may be research out there that I haven't seen. I mean, there may be something that says, yes, we're seeing this. From what I was looking, and I was digging pretty deep, but what I was seeing was that they're investigating. I mean, they're looking at that. How does alcohol is the way alcohol or even any food acts in our body is very tricky to follow the whole development of, you ingest it, you metabolize it, then what happens, because it can be a little bit different in each one of us. But I find it an interesting question. So I just wanted to bring that up, that's what I found in terms of what's available right now.
Now, is there a way to test that? Like, can you test through a blood test or something like that to know if it's increasing or causing changes in your tumor markers?
I know that people do have their tumor markers tested. I've never had it done, but
I haven't either. I've never had my blood tested.
Oh yeah, some women have said that have told me that their oncologist checks their tumor markers just to make sure they're low, after treatment. Because I look at it this way: we're out of treatment. So ideally, as no evidence of disease status, we should have no tumors, right? And so apparently the tumor marker, indicators can say if there's been any change in status. I've not had it done, but I'm intrigued by it. And I may ask my oncologist about it. But so they can measure tumor marker levels, but they can't measure, is there more angiogenesis occurring that I'm aware of? I don't know that there's a test.
I'm actually going in next Tuesday, so I'm going to add that to my list because I have many friends who are like, yeah, I had my blood done. And I'm like, well, they don't ever do that for me. So I'm wondering if it's by type of breast cancer, like, hormone driven or triple negative or something like that, or if it's stage of diagnosis, or that's an interesting question. So another thing I need to research.
Yeah. I'm starting to think it's by oncologists,
that could be too.
What's your healthcare provider's preference, or just what part of their routine screening? I don't, because they'll do blood draws and they'll look at liver enzymes and cholesterol and blood sugar and all of that, but I don't know. Yeah.
They do
to find out.
They do mine for the vitamin D all the time. That's what they're testing every 6 months. Because in the Pacific Northwest, we don't get enough sun. So we definitely need vitamin D for overall body and bone health and so many things. And that is definitely a preventative thing to do for breast cancer, which is good. And one thing you just mentioned, which brought up a question about the amount of sugar in alcohol, because there's I don't know if the conception that alcohol is all sugar and that sugar feeds cancers. Can you respond to that in any way?
Ooh, we'll have to do another show.
Okay, perfect.
No, but I mean, there is, any food or drink that has, the short answer is that has carbohydrate in it. The carbohydrate is metabolized to glucose, which is blood sugar, and it does impact your blood sugar, but sugar feeds all cells in your body, healthy cells as well as cancer cells. And that's
okay. Yeah. So the short answer is yes. And the more alcohol is putting more carbohydrates, which turn into more sugar, which is feeding any kind of cells. Okay. Got it.
Feeding all your cells use the carbohydrate for energy. All of them do. And your body can produce carbohydrate on its own, by the way, glucose. So it doesn't, staying away from alcohol, the same, keeping my sugar low but there are much better forms of energy to put into our body. Right.
Now, I wanted to talk about something else that we had discussed previously that I wasn't familiar with. So a connection between alcohol and something called fatty liver. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is pretty common. I've had clients in the past, before I started working in the cancer world, who came to see me at my nutrition practice at my personal training studio with this diagnosis from their doc. And it's a term for a range of conditions affecting people who drink little or no alcohol. But when people hear this term, particularly in response to their own diagnosis, they're like, wait a second, I don't even drink. Well, it's linked to overweight and obesity, insulin resistance, high blood sugar, high levels of fat in the blood, like triglycerides, high triglyceride levels. And these health issues appear to promote the deposit of fat in the liver. And so that's where the term fatty liver comes from. And that's what the diagnosis is typically indicative of. So that's addressed not with changing alcohol intake, particularly if you don't drink, it's changed with lifestyle behaviors.
Can fatty liver disease be yes, thank you. Yes. That's the word.
Yes, it can. Yes. And I brought that into our discussion because I've seen, again, on some of these private websites or, groups that I'm in, some women have said, oh, I was diagnosed with fatty liver disease. I don't drink. Could it be a side effect of treatment medications or potentially? But it's, also lifestyle is definitely can reverse fatty liver disease. So yeah, absolutely. It can be reversed.
What does fatty liver disease do to your body?
Well, it increases, like cholesterol can be off. It also, like metabolically, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, insulin resistance. Those are areas that are shifts in your metabolic makeup that potentially contribute to cancer recurrence. So it's about getting more active, paying more attention to your diet, looking at weight loss, if in fact that's a piece of this. So optimal metabolic health is balanced blood lipids, balanced blood sugar. And so once this starts to be reversed, typically that is an indication of all the markers coming down.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So I tried to do some research before this because wanted to be able to ask pertinent questions. Now, there's various recommendations out there from the medical community of how much is really okay if you do want to have alcohol. So is it be like, I can't drink alcohol at all? I can have it 3 days a week. Like what, based on your looking at all the research, what is the best recommendation for if you're going to drink, how much you should drink?
Yes, that's a great question because women ask that all the time. So the guidelines for the general population, let's say, people without cancer, is 1 drink or less per day for women, and 2 drinks or less per day for men. 1 standard drink, which is what this recommendation is equivalent to 5 ounces of wine or 8 ounces of beer. And so for cancer prevention, overall prevention, those of us who we don't fall in that, but prevention recommendation is that it's best not to drink at all because there's no minimum amount of alcohol that has been deemed quote unquote safe. Okay. For cancer recurrence prevention, even though studies aren't clear if alcohol causes recurrence, we do know that alcohol consumption increases risk for a secondary cancer and for other chronic diseases like liver disease and obesity. So having said all that, we can pick this up later because I know you have another question about that at the end, or we can kind of wrap it up right now.
Go ahead and continue.
Well, so this is where you've got to make your own judgment. Okay. So even though the final word on does alcohol cause recurrence of breast cancer is still out, knowing that it could be different information for those of us with hormone driven, it could be different for women who are postmenopausal, knowing they're looking at those, teasing out those little individual nuances, and we don't have a final on that. You got to make your own choice. Look at the recommendations for prevention. 5 ounces of wine a day is recommended standard. When's the last time you saw a 5 ounce pour of wine?
No, maybe at a restaurant who doesn't want to give you very much, but at home you pour 8 ounces ish. I mean, I do. I pour, I don't want to have to get up again if I'm going to have a glass of wine. I want a healthy glass of wine, but also like a beer is 12 ounces in a can. And at a restaurant, they're often 12 or 16 or even more. So our society here, especially in the US, is not conducive to any kind of healthy eating habits. You really have to make a concerted effort to watch what you are doing and what you're putting into your body.
That's right. Because if you're pouring a glass of wine now, which the glasses are like fish bowls, that's 2 drinks easily.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the thing. Are you having, think about frequency and volume. If someone's having a drink every single day, it may be more prudent to really pay attention to what 5 ounces looks like if they're trying to stay within that guideline. If they say, I'm not going to give up my drink a day, but I want to have what's recommended in terms of the amount, then measure out 5 ounces, find a glass that looks comfortable in, not like it's a little drop at the bottom. Get a smaller glass, put your 5 ounces of wine in that and savor it if you want it daily. If you decide, I just like wine once in a while, or whatever your drink of choice is, if I just like it on occasion, like a special occasion or like a holiday, that's a different story. That's a pattern that is a lower intake overall, right? Maybe your idea of once in a while is every weekend and you kind of go crazy on the weekends. Well, that if you tease that out over the week, that might translate to a daily drink or two.
Sure.
So you've got to look at your own habits, like do a review of your alcohol consumption now. Like, what are you doing? And be honest about it. Not like, well, I try to have it only once in a while. Trying to have it and actually having it are 2 different things. So be really, maybe track it for a week if you're not sure how much you're having. And then ask yourself, does that make me feel good about what I'm doing? Do I feel comfortable? Do I have, or is there like a disconnect between what I want to do and what I'm doing? And then make a decision from there. So you don't have to quit drinking. The choice is entirely up to you, but that can be hard for some people to make that decision, but
Well, especially after coming off the last 2 years, I've actually had multiple friends who I've spoken with recently who actually say they've taken a break from drinking because they were drinking every day during the time that we've all been home because of the stress of everything we've gone through due to the pandemic and being at home with our families all the time, who we love, but we still want to have that glass of wine every night. And they're like, okay, it's been too much. And so they're having to reevaluate the frequency of it and just decide, okay, like I'm going to stop for a while and see how I feel. And round the board, they all feel better. And well, and because one thing I know, and that's what I wanted to ask about too, is alcohol and weight gain, because we don't think about it as calories. It's a drink. It's fun. It's something, that we enjoy going into our body, but it can definitely, I know, cause weight gain, which is a problem, especially for those of us after a hormone driven cancer diagnosis.
Okay, you bring up so many good points. Let me just briefly touch on COVID. Alcohol consumption during COVID skyrocketed. I don't know if you've seen the stats, but absolutely right away. And I love how you said, so many people started drinking more because of the stress of COVID. You don't drink because of the stress. You drink to avoid the stress or manage the stress.
Yes.
So there are other ways to manage stress that don't have to be alcohol. So that's just a little takeaway to think, just ponder. Alcohol, it's an excuse to have more alcohol. It's stressful. I need a drink. Maybe you need a walk. Anyway, so just think about that. But as far as weight gain, so weight gain after treatment happens for a number of reasons, including stress and comfort eating.
Yes.
Emotional eating.
Yes.
Eating when you're not hungry.
Yes.
Eating portions that are way too much for you because you felt full half a plate ago, but you just keep eating because you're not paying attention.
Well, and I want to jump in real quick here. We were talking about pouring your wine in a smaller glass, and it made me think of putting your food on a smaller plate, because I think, myself included, we have issues from childhood where you were given a full plate of food and expected to finish your full plate of food before you're done. And so now I tend to overfill my plate and then finish my food and not even know if I'm still hungry or not, but I'm eating because I want to clean my plate.
That's another great topic, because plates used to be 9 inches in diameter. Now they're 12. So it's also just, people are served portions that are appropriate for a small family of 4.
Yes.
Not one person. But anyway, so all of those eating, to your point, yes, I agree with you 1,000%. Also, decreased levels of activity. Maybe you don't feel energized to do exercise. Maybe you're having some side effects of neuropathy. So decreased levels of activity, which make you just more inactive, as well as the side effects of treatment, meaning hormonal changes, medications, treatment itself, like steroids. So you notice I put that last, because what I find is, anyone can lose the weight. It doesn't mean it's easy, but there is an impact there. So alcohol is a source of empty calories, and it may encourage behaviors that could contribute to weight gain, meaning hangover foods. What do you eat when you're not feeling so great after you had a glass or 2 of wine too many? You
Greasy
want
food and French fries.
grilled cheese. Yeah, you don't want carrots and an apple. Eating more or differently when you're tipsy. Oh, I'm feeling a little loopy. Let's order pizza.
Taco Bell at 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. So if you think about it again, collectively, it's not that alcohol is directly responsible, it's the impact.
Perfect. Well, we do have more to talk about, but we are going to take another short break. So listeners, if you would like to be my guest or submit a warrior story to be read on the show, please email me at michellebeck@breastfriends.org. Stay with us. We'll be back. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Michelle Beck, and my guest is Cathy Leman, and we've been talking about alcohol and cancer and the do's and the don'ts. So, Cathy, one thing I do want to talk about, you, myself, and you also have had hormone-driven breast cancer, and we are really told to not introduce estrogen into our bodies because the cancer fed on that. For me, I even had my ovaries removed. I can't take anything to help with menopause symptoms other than natural things that don't have or contain estrogen. So can alcohol have anything to do with changing our estrogen levels?
Yes. So alcohol raises the circulating level of estrogen in your body, but it doesn't change the estrogen. I've seen that floating around online too, where women will say, oh, don't drink because it changes the estrogen in your body. Doesn't change it. It elevates the circulating levels. So
if I have a low, like I take the aromatase inhibitors to not have testosterone turn into estrogen. I don't have ovaries anymore. So presumably I have a fairly low level of estrogen. But whatever that is, the alcohol consumption will help that move around the body more.
No, it can raise the amount.
Okay.
So circulating means circulating through your body. Yes. So to moving around your body, but it raises the amount of estrogen in your body. Now, that sounds very alarming to say that when someone hears that, I can hear the response. Oh my God, my estrogen is so high now because I'm drinking alcohol. That's a black and white way of looking at it. It doesn't necessarily work that way. It's something to consider. What's the impact of alcohol on my overall health as a breast cancer survivor who's had hormone driven? It can increase the amount of estrogen in your body, but we're not at zero estrogen anyway. We're never at zero estrogen. I mean, we're at reduced levels of estrogen because of our medications and, to your point, having hysterectomy and such. But body fat cells contain estrogen, contribute to raising estrogen, and we still produce a tiny amount. So the goal is to keep it low. And so anything that could contribute to raising it, alcohol being one of those things, that can help factor into how often and how much, or if you want to include it in your diet. And there's no test for that. I mean, you can't go to the doctor and say, I've been drinking. We check how it's impacted my estrogen level. I
just had a girls' weekend and I need some help.
There you go. Check my blood. Maybe that should be something we could create, an in-home check your estrogen level from alcohol drinking test kit. And then you'd be like, oh my, I need to dial it back a little bit.
We'd probably make a lot of money on that. Trademark.
No. Yeah, for sure.
One of the questions I had here was, we talked about guidelines already. How much can I drink? And I think it was really about doing a mental assessment of overall what you are comfortable with, knowing the facts. Would that be a correct way to state that?
I couldn't have said it better, because you've got to make the choice that works for you. I always say, let me give you the facts. You weigh them, let them rumble around in your brain a little bit, see how that feels to you to, implement the guidelines as stated, or do you want to make up your own version? There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's what's comfortable for you. And so we know, again, that there's no level of alcohol that's considered safe for an initial diagnosis. So that's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
However, we also know people who drink their entire life and never have any type of cancer. That's the paradox of health, right? Of human beings being humans and eating and drinking food. So, or eating food and drinking alcohol. So you've got to make your own decision. For me, I still enjoyed my wine through my treatment and then after treatment. And then I would say, I don't even remember the exact day, but there was a day when I just kept reading the research and I'm like, I'm just not comfortable with this.
Mm-hmm.
I love red wine, but I hate breast cancer more than I love red wine. So I just stopped drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't miss it. I don't crave. I mean, if I wanted some, I would have it. It would probably make me feel horrible in about 20 seconds. But plus I'm postmenopausal. As we get older,
Mm-hmm.
we have an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. And as we age, we produce less of it. So we don't break down a metabolite to metabolize alcohol as efficiently. That's why you can have a little bitty glass of wine as older women.
Mm-hmm.
And we wake up and go, I feel like I should have been dancing on the bar all night because I feel horrible.
It
and
really
I
is.
had anything.
It's like every 10 years, it gets a lot worse. Like,
yes.
On a rare occasion, if I do have like 2 glasses of wine, especially red, I feel awful. And I honestly have kind of given up wine because the moment I have it, my hot flashes flare up. It's literally instantaneous. And it makes me so sad because I did love a nice glass of red wine. It just makes, but it makes me uncomfortable. And I feel like crap the next day and I don't have time to feel like crap anymore. Like it's not worth it.
That's what I was going to say. Is it worth it to you? I mean, I have been on nutrition educational trips to the Bordeaux region of France that were built around studying the French paradox and drinking French wine. Heaven. But can I still go there and get the knowledge I need as a dietitian, enjoy the French countryside and not drink wine and feel like I'm doing some good things for my boobs? Yes, I can. So that's just a decision you've got to make that you feel comfortable. So I've seen some women say, I am not giving up my alcohol because life is too short. God bless you. Drink your alcohol. There's no right or wrong way, and there should be no shame around it. No alcohol shaming to anyone. It's what works for you is what's right for you.
Now, does it matter the type of alcohol? There's the giant stereotype that women drink all the wine, but I know men who drink wine too. But, beer, and I do like a nice vodka cocktail. Does it matter what type of alcohol you're putting into your body, or is it just the ethanol that's in there that is the bottom line?
Yeah, it's the ethanol. Yeah. Now, for other situations like heart disease, I actually saw some research that, all the research tends to be talked about is that red wine is protective, but I've seen some research that says all alcohol essentially can be protective have some benefits for heart health. That's not my area of expertise, but I found that interesting in my research for this, when I talk about alcohol with my clients, but no, it's all alcohol contains the ethanol.
So and we talked, there's even the small amounts of ethanol in the non-alcoholic beer or wine. So even that could be a little suspect if you're really trying to not put any of these bad things in your body, correct?
I don't know how much of an impact that would have. I mean, a non-alcoholic beer is like 0.001% or something. And it's very low. Crazily enough, I can feel it. If I drink a large non-alcoholic beer, I can feel the alcohol just because I drink nothing. Because I split one with my husband because I'm like, we split a non-alcoholic beer with me. It makes me tipsy, which is so pathetic. But okay. But it just underscores there's still a little bit in there. But I can't even imagine that would have an impact. I mean, it's so small.
Well, too, one thing to also think about, if you go out to dinner and you're not drinking alcohol, your bill is going to be a lot cheaper.
The money we save not buying cases of wine or drinking when we go out, I'm going to buy a new, I don't know, coat or something.
I mean, it really does make a big difference. It's my husband and I, when we met at work, and so then we were living together, we would come home at night every night and have a bottle of wine for years. And
wow, that's impressive. I can't do that.
Well, that was I was in my late 30s. This was a while ago. So, and it was, just washing off the day with a bottle of wine. And then we had our son. And so that stopped. And then after I was diagnosed, like it just stopped. And then the medication, and, really for us, drinking is a social thing.
Yeah.
And like, we're going camping this weekend, and, I will probably have a couple cocktails or whatever, but that's what I'm comfortable with at this point. So it really is, I think, what I said earlier about just knowing the facts, finding what you are comfortable with.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how you describe that, transition from having it at the end of the day and then, tapering with your son, being all of that. But, and I remind my clients, who say, well, I can't imagine giving up my alcohol. I have it at the end of my day to relax, and I share it with my husband or my significant other or my friends. And I remind them, what you're celebrating is the end of the day, getting through it intact, and being with people you love.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen regardless of whether there's alcohol involved or not. It's a marketing message that we have bought into. You need alcohol to relax. It gets even better if you pour a glass of wine. There's nothing wrong with enjoying wine. I'm not saying that at all, but just think about, what are you really trying to accomplish? And can you accomplish the same outcome that feels good to you without the alcohol? Because maybe you introduce the alcohol or keep the alcohol, but there's that little niggling guilt in the back, like, oh, all right, I'm having it, but I really shouldn't. That's not okay either. Right. So either own it, the decision to include it in your life in a way that you feel good about, or cut it out and recognize that, your life is rich regardless of whether there's alcohol or not. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's
100%. And I do feel like the transition of, okay, having to take care of my son, much more important than a bottle of wine or a glass of wine even. And now it's like, I just don't need it. There's been times when I've had people over and we open a bottle of wine and then it sits literally on my counter for a couple of weeks. I'm like, oh, I should throw that away because I'm not going to drink it. I don't reach for it. It's just been a change in how we live our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And you probably don't miss it having it the way you used to, is what I'm hearing you say. So it's just, I think it's good just to, again, we don't have to do black or white approaches to our nutritional health. That's what women, I find they want. They're like, tell me what to do. Should I do this or should I do that? I can't tell you. You've got to decide, because there's more than one way to approach it. Right. So
that was one of the challenges for me when I was had both my cancer diagnosis, that I was very fortunate. They were both caught very early. And so I had choices. And I didn't want choices. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. Yeah. And that is something that I still struggle with in terms of my eating. I still, even you and I've talked so many times, and I know the things I should do, but that's something that I still struggle with. So you give me the research, you say this and this and this, and I'm like, oh, but that one's still really hard. That's the hardest thing for me post treatment is my food intake. I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm.
Well, and very quickly, because I want to leave time for us to wrap up with everything, but to your point about tell me what to do, tell me what to eat. I can create, as a dietitian, a beautiful meal plan for someone. Eat this every day for breakfast, eat this for lunch. And they will do that until they have a day where they aren't in the mood for that. Or they feel like they had a crappy day and need to solve the problem with, a drive-through fix or something. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what people tell you. You're not going to do it anyway if you're not in the mood. So why, let's figure out how to put food into your life in a way that feels good to you and makes your body feel great and ticks off all the boxes for, I am supporting a reduced risk of recurrence as best I can, knowing that there's no one food or pattern that's even going to do that at this point that we know of, but it can help you stay healthier overall. So, yeah.
And my guess would be that would be your biggest takeaway from this show.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. Thank you. We are almost out of time. So I want to reiterate again for our listeners where they can find you and all of your information.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a website. It's cathyleman.com. It's Cathy with a C. There's no H in Leman. It's CATHYLEMAN.com. And for all your listeners, I have created a little special link for them to go to get on the waiting list for my new program that's going to be launching soon. Depending on when someone listens to this, it may have already have launched, but it's called the Peaceful Plate Program. And in the Peaceful Plate Program, I'm teaching my Peaceful Plate method, which is really geared toward helping post-treatment survivors eat with peace, not panic. Because I've spent the last year really working with women who have just informed my suspicion that this is a serious problem, and it doesn't have to be. So that link for anyone interested in getting on the waiting list is cathyleman.com/peaceful plate program.
Got it.
And I'm on Instagram at hormone.breastcancer.dietitian. I'm known as the hormone breast cancer dietitian, and creating this Peaceful Plate program is really, it's just sort of a culmination of me as a survivor, understanding what helps me manage the food and alcohol situation. Because I always say to my clients and women who follow me, I'm you. So what I'm going to do is going to be, you better be sure it's safe, because I'm trying to avoid the same thing you are. But it also is informed by my, my professional expertise as a dietitian. So I'm very excited. It's going to be launching soon. And
awesome. I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me share that. I'm really excited about it.
Perfect. Well, Cathy, thank you again. We are out of time, but the listeners, we will definitely have Cathy back because she's just a fountain of useful information. So thank you. So listeners, again, if you need our services, please go to breastfriends.org to see what we can do for you or a loved one. You can make a donation on our website or by texting BF Radio to 41444. You can find our show on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also watch all of the 2022 episodes on the Breast Friends YouTube channel. If you would like to be my guest, email me at michellebeck@breastfriends.org. We'll be back next week. And until then, remember, we rise by lifting each other.